Hey everyone, I'm so excited to kick this off. So we've had an incredible day, a lot of advice and real life stories of women in the trenches and what do they do. And I find a lot of times when you're at these conferences, you're so inspired and you want to do something, and then you sort of go back and say like, what was the takeaway? How can I do something? I mean, we did just learn about our eyebrows and the golden triangle. I'm definitely going to do a video tutorial after this, Anastasia. But I think this section is really about actionable steps. And these two women know a lot about action. They're both trailblazers in their industries that are traditionally male-dominated, and they've led the charge to also hold the door open after them and invite other women into the room. So I'm really excited to talk to them both and to get some real action steps from here. So Nina, I'm going to start with you.
Okay.
You have such an incredible career, and in your world, people look to you as a leading force, and you've been able to build allies in every industry. What does it take to build allies and get that support to have people rally behind you? How do you do that?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I love that last panel, and I'm going to keep that in my mind. I can't go back.
Yeah.
I think that just says it all. One of the things that I say sometimes to my clients as they're making their way in their career is I say, hold tight to the good people. And then let everyone else go. And I know that might sound a little harsh, but the truth of it is that not everyone is going to be there for you. And at some point you have to discern who is and who is not. And when you find good people, when you find people who believe in the things you believe in, who are aligned with you, hold tight to them. We were just kind of jokingly saying before we came on the stage, we're going to be together forever because we are in a war together. And that's, you just feel that instinctively about people. So I think early in my career, I was able to, and I'll talk briefly about my legal career, I was able to meet a few good men who really prized my intellect and my ambition and who supported me. And they were my contemporaries. They really weren't my mentors. They were men who were the same age as me. And we linked arms together and we went out and really started the law firm that I started now 30 years ago. And they believed in me and I believed in them, and we all had the same work ethic, and we just put our nose to the grindstone, and we just went out there every single day to build our practice, because none of us were really kind of children of the entertainment industry, and it's a business where there is a lot of nepotism and relationship-driven advancement, and we went for it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good actionable step. When I went to I think it was the very first Time's Up meeting in New York City, you were there, Nina, and you were somebody who led the charge, kept the room on point, and moved us forward, and really inspiring other women in the room to take action. Is there something, I loved when we had a call last week, we have a little prep call secret before you do these, and we have a little chat, and you said, like, don't wait for the big item. Don't think, oh, I can't do that, and that was so inspiring. I thought about that every day, honestly, since you said it to me. Can you tell us that philosophy?
Yeah, I think you said in a really nice way that I'm bossy, but that's okay.
No, we need to lead the charge.
I like that. Yeah, I think sometimes we get stuck on this idea that everything we do that institutes change has to be like some huge thing. And if we can't do the huge thing, then we don't do anything. And the truth of it is that, it's such a cliche, but every journey starts with the first step. And I just really believe in taking that first step. So, every situation I'm in, work and personal and professional, I always try to think, what is it about this? I met at lunch. At lunch, I was seated with the Girl Scouts. I don't know if they're actually here, but
yep, right there. Yep.
Hi, Isabel. And I was just so moved by them, and I gave them my only Time's Up pen, and I promised I would send more. And it made such an impression on me that I know when I go home, I'll look at their website and I'll start to think about how I can contribute. And my contribution isn't going to be huge, but I know it will be appreciated. But it happened because someone reached across the table to me at lunch and said, hi, my name is Isabel. And I think that's just an example of a small step.
That's great.
Can I just add a little
Yeah.
bit about Nina? Because Nina's a relatively new friend. We've met in the past year. And so I've had a chance to watch her work in different contexts. And I think she represents so much of what is hopeful, that makes me optimistic about the future and the change that we can make in society. Because Nina is not like a chess beater. Like, she does not wear all of her accomplishments on her sleeve or like at all. She's a very soft-spoken leader, but she commands so much respect in all the different circles. We work together on Time's Up, in entertainment and in Time's Up and in many different contexts. Like, she's this like quiet leader. And I think we have been living in a world where in most cases the loudest person in the room generally commands most of the attention and most of the energy and like undue respect in many cases. And I think we're moving into a world where people who have different leadership styles and different personalities, and you can be an introvert or an extrovert, and you can still like be incredibly effective and command great respect. And I think the world of you. So.
Oh, thank you. And it's one of the most wonderful things about Time's Up is that, as you get older, you kind of like your base of friends kind of narrows. I think that happens to all of us. So when you get to this point in your career where you can meet all of these great people, it has just been, I love all of you so much. I always start off by thanking my Time's Up sisters, and I really do feel it's a sisterhood, and it's an intersectional sisterhood because it's so easy for us to think that we don't have things in common with people, when the truth of it is, how you go to Europe or you go to a foreign country and you're walking down the street and then someone says something to you in English and you haven't said anything. And that's because we're just so readily identifiable as Americans. So there's something when we move outside of this space that we're in, that everyone sees as being so common about us. I wish we could see more of it in ourselves. And I say that from a place of, as a woman of color, and I'm very proud of being a woman of color, and very proud of being from Harlem, second generation. And that, I was raised at a time when Harlem was very, very segregated. 5 o'clock, every white person left Harlem. They closed their stores and they left. And my schools were segregated, all my teachers were African American. So when I started to move out of that circle, it was so uncomfortable for me. And I think that is kind of an analogy of what it's like when all of us move outside of our circles. And I encourage all of you to do so.
I think that's a great point. I think Aileen also just taking the helm here and loving on Nina and lifting her up is one of the important things, and I think a really great actionable takeaway for us to think about. When you walk into a meeting and there's another woman in the room who has a superpower and she's not speaking up about it, you can say like, hey, Aileen, remember last week you solved this for me because you know everybody at the UN or wherever it is, and then people are like,
that definitely was not me, that's a different example.
So, that's not her example, but it's like, everybody in Silicon Valley, you do. So then people say, oh, I should call on her for that. And I think that, and I hate to be giving, sweeping generalization, but I think that men are much quicker to say like, I know everybody here, I can do that. I'm great at this. And I think we're a little more like, hey, they should know I'm great at this. They've seen me do it. And we don't call it up. So I think sometimes being in a room with other women and calling them out and saying, you're terrific at this, you're super well-spoken, why don't you lead the charge here, why don't you make the first call, and break down the door for us, is really a great actionable item, which you just exhibited right here.
Well, I think Desiree was encouraging us to come up with concrete examples of things that we can all do. And one of the things, I remember reading a number of years ago an article about women in the Obama administration, and how in the beginning of the Obama administration, in some meetings there were not that many women. And that the women noticed that the men would be like, oh, Joe, that's a great point, or building on Mike's point, or I love what Larry just said. And that they generally didn't tend to do that. Men generally don't do that for women. And so the women started doing that for each other. And there's a theory called the shine theory about how, if we're in a meeting together and we're the only women, if I build on Nina and I say I think Nina's right, I think we really need to follow Nina's lead, and she does that for me, then it helps balance out some of the power dynamics. And it helps also kind of bring up often the minorities in the room, who are often people of color and women. And so I think all of us can practice shine theory in our everyday life, whether in any kind of a meeting or a social situation. Notice who's not being listened to, who's not being heard, who hasn't said something, or who's who isn't as loud. And if you help prop them up or include them, you can give them more confidence. I think that's a small thing that we can do that helps a lot.
Yeah, maybe that's a concrete goal the next time you're in a meeting. When you make a statement, amplify someone else. And do that over and over and over again. And you'll build allies. You talk about, one of your first question was, how do you build allies? That's one of the ways that you build, by acknowledging people's contributions.
I want to go back to Ally's question for you, and I think it's even harder in your industry because we know that what you do, it's venture capital is 91% men.
Yep.
So that's hard to build allies when you're 9% of the whole industry, and you've done a great job. And I know a lot of men in Silicon Valley look to you as one of the women who have made it across the border, and they feel like they send you
across the border.
No, it is. We know that.
Fair.
So how do you build allies? What do you do? Is there any secrets you can share with us?
I don't know if I have secrets, but I would say, so I work on a nonprofit in the tech industry called All Raise, where our mission is to try and accelerate the success for women of all kinds as founders or as funders. Hopefully we'll also expand to kind of team members and employees and what we call operators. And one of the things that's important to us at All Raise, and I've been actually taught this by a lot of my All Raise sisters, is like we try and motivate by greed, not by fear. But trying to shame people for the past, and the past that, the tech industry created for ourselves, we dug ourselves into a very deep hole, that we need a lot of people with picks and shovels to dig out together, that like making people feel bad for mistakes that we've made in the past is not gonna get people to dig harder and faster. But motivating people, and like because the venture capital in the tech industry is generally for profit, that they can be more successful if they actually do more on the right side of history faster is the way that we're going to get more people on the team. And so, I'm not like, I am pretty pissed off a lot of the time, so it's not like I always am just like taking the high road all the time. I have friends who take the high road more than I do, and they try and pull me up because there's a lot of good reasons to be mad and to be resentful, but try and like kind of vent with my girlfriends and sometimes my guy friends too. I think a mistake that I made I've been doing my job for almost 20 years, is that I think that all of us kind of shielded the men in our industry from a lot of the challenges that women and people of color or minorities have gone through because we were trying not to be a pain in the ass. And I think we were given the impression, like, if you were a pain in the butt, we really won't want you to sit around these tables anymore. So try not to be too, like, don't be high maintenance, don't be difficult. But as a result, people never heard what it's like. And they have to understand, like, you have to make people proximate to problems to understand them. And so I think, figuring out women are not gonna solve our societal issues alone. We have to partner with and co-opt and ally with men to change the status quo. And so figuring out, who are the people who are empathetic and bringing them in to understand personal situations or personal contexts, that they'll have more, then they can actually be a stronger ally and a better representative.
I love that. I think one of the things that you do, Aileen, also really well is you convene women. So in small groups, when we're at events, like you're hosting something tonight, like you're getting women out talking to each other. Is that intentional, or how did that come about for you? Your house, Lady Fest?
I don't know. I think I just really I like, especially women. Like I get so energized being in a room with all of us here. It's so energizing. It's amazing. It's partially because it's not the norm in most cases, right? And I love that this morning, Christiane Lagarde said that she made a point to not be the only woman in meetings. Like, it's crazy in 2019 that you actually have to like make that a rule because you're in so many meetings that have only one woman in them. Like, I really hope that we can change that. But the only way we're gonna change that is by us being together and feeling the energy and the confidence, because many of us live on islands where we are the only women. And you have to know that there are other women on other islands and that we're all connected.
And I think a little bit with All Raise, you've also allowed women to ask questions. So I think that's something that there's this demystifying process that needs to happen for us. And sometimes you're in the room and there's so much jargon and people are like, oh, the PT DAR, and you're like, what are they saying? Like, will I ever catch on? And so with All Raise meetings of Vinci, being like, okay, does everybody understand what we're saying here? And you stopped and you've sort of like brought us along, demystifying, allowing us to ask questions.
It's been, what's been really fun about All Raise and Time's Up and many industries are having different groups to try and either focus on safety and justice or focus on accelerating success.
Right.
You know, because the group of us that started All Raise work in the industry, we understand how the industry works really well. We understand how people get promoted. We understand how people get hired. We understand how deals get done. And so we basically got together and we kind of did like a consulting project on our industry to figure out what are the root causes that are causing women not to succeed in our industry. And then there were a number of women who had been operators or had been founders, and they're very product oriented. And so they kind of came up with ideas, basically products or programs to ship to try and address the systemic issues in our industry. And so people kind of raised their hands and said, I'm really interested in helping more women become general partner. Other women were like, I'm really interested in helping make sure that at the associate level, women advance to vice president, and from vice president that they advance to partner. And then someone else was like, I'm really interested in working with the investors, LPs, to put pressure on venture firms to hire more women and people of color. And so then we had them kind of write like a quick business plan on kind of like what was the problem they were trying to solve, what resources did they need, what was their MVP, their minimum viable product that they were going to ship, and what were the milestones or metrics that they were going to measure to see if it was working, and like make it all happen within 6 months. And then we just like go for it. And so all these different women basically then would recruit other women to be these like little startup teams of 5 or 7 people and ship products to try and address all these different problems. So it's been really fun also because there's nothing like doing work together to build relationships. And so we have all these amazing new relationships across women in industry where we all had been living on islands, and now we're actually a team.
Yeah, it's been a real interesting process. We just were at our board retreat for Time's Up, and it was just so great. We were sitting in that room and to hear so many different perspectives. But I think you also have to be open to hearing the perspectives. We had Time's Up has many groups within Time's Up, and the African American women got together, the Asian Pacific Islander women got, I mean, it was just, there have been all these little, and there was something that really funny that happened. The speaker talked to us about a lot of different things, and then she said, now I know some of you are sitting there thinking, what is she talking about? I know, and you're planning on going into your little side group and talking about me and talking about somebody else. But how about you just talk about how we're going to make this better? And everyone in the room laughed because there was a kernel of truth in that. That sometimes we aren't always our best selves because we have to be so defensive often and just moving through our world. And it's sometimes hard to move those barriers aside to build something. So I would say to you, you just make that effort. It's so much harder, I know sometimes, it's so much easier, I think, than it seems. But it was just the funniest thing when Brittany said that. She said, I know that some of you are sitting here right now thinking about who you're going to talk about when you get to, don't do it. And it was funny, someone in the room, actually a very well-known person, said, oh my God, that was me. I was getting ready. and when she owned up to it, I think we all laughed. So yes.
I think we're at the phase now where the shock and awe started to wear off a little bit, that women are changing the game and looking, and now there's a little bit of resistance going on. Are you coming up against resistance, or what are you feeling right now?
We're talking about doing the hardest thing in the world, which is to change the culture. So there's going to be resistance. I don't think everyone's just going to get up and say, you know what, about half of us are going to get up from the table, leave these jobs, and give them to you because it's the right thing to do. And for a lot of people, I'm not telling this audience anything it doesn't know, it's really hard sometimes to recognize your own privilege and how your privilege may be a big part of why you are where you are. I mean, the American spirit is all about, can do, building yourself up from your bootstraps, that whole notion. And we very rarely give credit to, just the littlest things like being born here. As opposed to being born in other places where it's not so easy, or having the opportunity to immigrate here. So I think, we should understand that we're all privileged in a sense, so understand other people who don't want to give up their privilege, but it doesn't mean that we're not going to continue to press them to do so. I think perseverance is the biggest and most important part of this, because if people think you're going to go away and you play into that in the smallest way, then they win. But if you just keep at it over and over and over again, which is what we do in our work, in Time's Up, in our lives, we're actually, I think we're making inroads, and it's hard and it's steps back, and it's not always forward. Remember, we read history from the present, right? So we always read in the books about, and then all of a sudden they're signing, the Declaration of Independence. Or all of a sudden it's D-Day and the war is over. But there were a lot of steps backwards and forwards that got us to this point, and that's the moment that we're in now, and we can't be discouraged by the steps back.
Yes, agreed.
I
would say in tech, it's not so much resistance as I think that the business folks have become quite savvy about knowing what to say. So there's a lot of, the talk is much better, and the awareness is much better. The walk is what we need to watch for. That people are talking the talk, but they are not walking the walk. And so they're pretending, I call them faux-gressives, right? They're like fake progressives. They're pretending that they care about inclusion and diversity and culture, and then they go on a bro trip, or they raise around and they only call their guy friends, and the company's gonna be really successful, so they're making guys who are already wealthy more wealthy by cutting them into each other's deals. And that in your business life or your work life or your social life, there's many opportunities. I'm going on a business trip, it's 30 guys who are all founders. These guys are very successful. They can say, hey, well, let's invite 30 women. Let's build new relationships. So what if we've had this dinner club and we've been having dinner with each other for 10 years? Let's change it. There's many opportunities. I'm picking on this in particular because there was a business trip in the press where a bunch of founders, mostly men, went to Italy, and they met with a famous Italian designer who heralded them as the Leonardos of our time. When a famous person calls a bunch of entrepreneurs the Leonardos of our time, what message is that sending? Right? You don't have to say Leonardos, right? But you're basically saying, from however many hundreds of years it's been, it's the same, it's men. And that's not true, but it's also not the message that we want to send. So in everyday language, both, the guys going on this trip, changing who's invited, but then saying, hey, I appreciate what you said, but I actually feel like maybe we should change it, so we call it something else. Little things that basically show that you're taking the effort to actually correct small things make a huge difference.
And I say invite yourselves. I can't tell you how many times I've called and I've heard about guys who are meeting about something, and I'll just call and say, I'm one of the leading transactional entertainment lawyers in this field. Why wasn't I invited to that?
Good for you. That's awesome.
Wow.
Yeah. Or if I hear that, the trades are going to do a story about, kind of senior entertainment lawyers, I called and said, when am I going to be interviewed for that? Because clearly I'm in that group. And I'm not saying that with any hubris. I am in that group. And everyone in that group knows that. So if you don't include me, you're not going to look good. You're going to look like you missed something. And that really did happen to me. I'll wrap up, say this very quickly. This is a person who is of some controversy, but the reason that I was on the first magazine cover I was ever on, which was Black Enterprise, is because the publisher of Black Enterprise called and said he was going to do this wrap-up about stories about Black entertainment lawyers. And Johnny Cochran called him and said, if you don't put Nina Shaw on that cover, people are going to know that you don't know who the really important lawyers are.
Nice.
And that's how I became part of that group.
That's a super actionable item for us. We are in our last minute here. I wanted to give it one last action item for you guys. Is there anything special in the day that you think about? I know this is a little personal, but is there anything in the morning where you're like, I think in the morning when I get up, I sort of think about sometimes I'm putting on, I call it my suit of armor. So certain days if I have meetings and it's all men, I'll think about something that I feel like really powerful in, that I know that like I can just take that off my list. Like, okay, I'm ready to go. That's off my list. Now it's all about this. Like, is there anything in your day when you have a big day and you go out there to face the world? We're trying to create an army of action-oriented women here today.
I have to admit, like the first thing I thought this morning is like we have 3 kids and I'm not home, and they're all at camp, so I'm like, are they gonna remember that they have to bring lunch to camp today? But I guess the last thing I'd say is, yeah, I've gotten so much out of my career and my personal life by just reaching out to women who, in some cases, who I don't know, and bringing people together. Sometimes it's a group of 4 people, sometimes it's a group of 8, sometimes it's hundreds. But sometimes you look at people and they seem like they've got it all together and they don't need more friends and they're very busy. And so you'll think like, oh, I don't want to bother them, it's an intrusion. But you know, both reaching out to someone who you think that you could learn from and hopefully they will learn from you is the worst thing that can happen is they'll say they can't do it. But bringing together groups of people in your office, like in your profession at other firms, like comparing notes, like this is in male-dominated fields. When you're 90% men, they have chances to compare notes on work, how to handle situations all the time. And when you're in the vast minority, you're thinking about stuff by yourself all the time. And it's unbelievable how helpful it is to have friends who kind of do the same work or in similar life situations, like kind of outside of your own workplace. So make an effort to build those relationships. I think it will help like basically raise the tide for everyone. It'll also be great for you.
Exactly, and you can create your own circles, and I try to do that with the women in my firm. You know, we are a bit of a critical mass, and I'm always like suggesting that we do things together. And, you know, going out sometimes after work, which I have to tell you, I could do without, but but it's important because they love it. And, you know, or we're having a makeup night, which sounds a little cliche, but everyone's really looking forward to it. And it's just one of those things that I'm always trying to figure out ways for us to get together and do things and become bonded to each other, because it does spread from the social to the work side of it.
I think this is great. Thank you guys.
Thank you, Desiree. Thank you so much.
We're good.